Wow, welcome to another edition of the Motley Croc. We are actually, 11 days into the new year, 2024. 1/11/2024. I can't believe it's going that fast. I mean, we're just cooking along really, really quick here. Spent a little bit of time out at the Apollo Beach in the Manatee Viewing Center. If anybody's ever been out that way before, it's actually a really, really cool um, place to go visit. We got some people coming in. I want to make sure that everybody gets on here real quick and I can get everybody in and everybody's coming up. If you guys are able to see me and you can hear me really well or hear me at all, leave me a comment. Let me know that your guys are here and we will definitely go from there. We're going to talk about a couple things tonight. Brittany brought up some cool topics about something that was found in Ireland. I think that kind of stumps science a little bit. So it's always nice to find something like that. And we're going to talk about a giant skeleton. I think that was 8'2". And he was kind of a spectacle, but he was on display way back in the day. And he was 22 years old, I think, when he passed. And we want to touch on that. He didn't want his skeleton there. Hey, Bill, how you doing, bud? And so we're going to be doing that as soon as I get my co-partners in. I'd be glad to get everybody going. So we'll just talk a little bit about that until they all jump on here. Let's hope that they've got it. I think everything should be good. They should have the links. We want to make sure everybody's good to go. Sean, what's up, buddy? We were out today. We went to the Manatee Viewing Center. It's over in Apollo Beach, Florida. If you haven't been over there, it's a really good place to check out. Go check it out. And Sean took us up there again today. I guess he's been going there a lot. So people recognize him. He was a regular celebrity. All right. Brittany's knocking on the back door. What's up, Brittany? How are you doing?
Good. How are you doing? Sorry, I went to sign on and I had like a weird lag with my audio on my other, like it was literally glitching. So I had to restart it and then sign back in.
I know sometimes it does that. I think it has a lot to do with some of the way we broadcast, and who knows? I probably got to buy some new equipment. You know how it goes; it updates. So what I was doing was I was letting everybody know what we were going to talk a little bit about tonight because there was some stuff you said that was found in Ireland that really put a stump on science. I really want to talk about that.
Mm-hmm.
And then that case of that giant that passed away when he was 22 years old. Hey, Julie, how are you? Happy New Year.
Hi, Sean.
Passed away,
Hi, Julie.
He didn't want his body on display, and then it got put on display, and then there was some references of how they were going to make it go away or they're going to re-renovate and then honor his wishes. But I thought that was an interesting thing to say the least.
Yeah, I remember that. I remember that case, and he was really cool because I think he measured in like 7 feet or something like that. Like they thought he was a Viking or something at first.
They said alive. He was probably 8'2" to 8'4".
Oh, geez,
he was Irish. He was not a Viking. Vikings were very small people. A lot of people think of Vikings because of the folklore, but a big Viking in a Vikings era, 5'8" to 5'9" was a monster person.
That's 100% right, because I remember reading about Leif Erikson. Like everybody knows who Leif Erikson is. Like he is like the leaders of the Vikings, but he had written in journals.
What's up, Joshua? How are you doing, bud?
Hey, Joshua, in his original journals, when he first got over to America side, in his journals, he talked about these hairy wild men that he had come in contact with that towered over him, and they smelt horrible. And they would like pummel them with rocks and things like that. Like he actually wrote about this in his own like journals. So like I'm fascinated by Viking history and Viking, like everything Viking. But then when I read about that and Leif Erikson's actual personal journals on one of his times here and came in contact with not just the indigenous people, like these weird hairy man from the bush that towered them. So like you're saying, people have that misinformed and like as misinformation. It's true. But like Vikings weren't really tall people, but they were taller for that time versus everybody else. They were more barbaric. So 100%. Imagine Leif Erikson, who would have been noted as like a very tall, striking man as a Viking, barbaric, very, very large for his own size. Now he's seeing something and meeting somebody that's twice his size, towering and looking down at him and his men.
Big
deal. To be, yeah. Like
I mean, if you were 5'8", you came up against a guy that was 8'2". Oh my word, man!
I'd get back on my boat.
He's got some leverage to swing. Heidi, how are you?
Hi, Heidi. I'd go away.
That would be interesting. But I want to touch. Can we get into a little bit? Jimmy's going to be with us here in a little bit. He was just pulling in. He's probably dealing with some BS weather because God knows we've had that for a while. But can we talk a little bit about that? What you were talking about in Ireland that they found before we get into the big skeleton guy. But you said it was kind of stumping science, I guess.
This completely stumps science. So it actually stumps not only Irish history, but also European history. So there was an article that was published, and I think even Science Magazine brought it up as well. Hi, Michael. Hi, Judy. Hi, Heidi. So basically, they were excavating. Now, I love whenever I hear about limestone caves and like the discoveries in there because it preserves everything like so beautifully.
The
And
limes.
so
Okay.
the
Michael,
limestone
what's up,
does.
bud?
And
Okay.
so they had been digging in these caves. And I guess this actually happened. This particular bone that they found was in a limestone cave in Ireland, and it was pulled back in like 1940s. But there was a scientist who was currently had been given like, I think it was like 30,000 bones, right? That have been discovered in Ireland for decades. And she had to literally start going through them, analyzing all of them and like dating them and so forth. And she came across an elk bone that was and there were elk, the large red deer and the large elk that were once roamed Ireland.
Okay.
And so she found this beautiful bone. She was analyzing it, one of the top scientists at the university, and she's going through it. And all of a sudden she realizes under the scope that this particular large mass piece of the elk bone had not just broken or like kind of decayed on its own, like naturally. This had actually been carved and eaten by something. So she did further analysis and found out that it wasn't like eaten by an animal. It had actually been picked and carved, and like whatever person was eating this elk was using kind of more crude tools, like ancient tools, to get the meat off the bone. So there were like these markings and digs inside the bone that showed signs of human activity dating 30,000 years earlier than what Irish and European history said the first settler of Ireland was. So it is actually like rewriting Irish history and Europe's history.
That's pretty crazy.
Yeah. So they actually found human activity killing and living and thriving in Ireland, living in these caves, living on the land 30,000 years before the estimated time of what they thought the first person colonized Ireland. So it not only changed, and for like 2 weeks, I guess the scientists like sat on it. And because she was so taken back and flabbergasted by her finds, and also had to make sure that all of her data was correct before she presented it to the university and the team to say, guys, we have to relook at our entire history for Ireland as well as Europe. This changes everything. So there's literally, because of this one elk find, this bone was found in like the 1930s, 1940s
So,
in a cave, in a
is
limestone
that one of those
cave.
giant elks, the ones that went extinct?
Yeah.
Okay.
But now it's not even just so much extinct as if it might be people involved killing them off as well, because there shouldn't have been people there at that time. But now we now know there was like 30,000 years before. So that changes everything, all based off of one tiny bone. Well, it wasn't really tiny because the elks were massive, elk, but then it was the giant elk of Ireland. So it was a decent sized bone, but it was actually like tool digs, like in the bone. That meant a person was using tools to get the meat off the bone. 30,000 years prior. I can't get this out of my head.
No,
like, I love it.
I mean, like I said, there's been a lot of things that, I believe this, as we go a little future, isn't there a woolly mammoth that's supposed to be born sometime this year? Yes.
This the end of the
Joshua,
year,
they've been talking about it. If it happens, it happens. It kind of goes up and down, but I do believe it. But back to what I was saying, I think that as we go forward and our technology gets better, we're going to be able to find and read things a lot easier, and we're going to be able to discover things a lot easier than we did before. And I think it's going to change some stuff for sure.
Oh, absolutely. I just think that I was having this conversation today. I think that we have to step away from the repetitiveness of science that we utilize all the time, because we are advancing on other
We're going to
ways.
find new science.
Exactly. And I think we need to, like, and I think it's okay to have kind of an underlining baseline of like what we consider as what we know of right now. But I
Right.
think because we're finding so many new things so quickly now that we weren't before, because of how many people are really trying to creatively think out of the box in science, I think that I really believe that I think people will be shocked that our history will probably be really rewritten within like 5 years. You know what I mean? Like, I think people are all of a sudden gonna be like, I didn't
I
know
mean,
this, and
I
what
was
the
looking
fudge?
at I was looking at some stuff. So the other day I was over, I was over at Epcot, and I went into the Canada side of things.
Yeah.
Hey Kim, how are you? And they did this big, I don't know if you remember it, but I don't think I've ever did it before. Not that I'm not interested in Canada, but when you're younger, when you do like theme parks, you want to do like thrill rides and eat junk food and be ridiculous.
Yeah.
Now it's kind of like I said, we go there sometimes. To me, it's like time traveling, because I remember there's a lot of stuff that's still there and still around. And I remember sitting with my family or whatever, and you kind of go back to those spots and you just remember where you are. And it's like the time machine's there, but the people that were with you aren't. It's an interesting way to look at it. But anyways, they did this whole thing on Canada and when it started and how big it was, right? And they actually made this vast video, and like they were, obviously it's been updated. And I was looking at some of the landscape there. There is a lot of things that haven't been found, I'm sure. I mean,
Up in Canada.
there might be an entire indigenous people civilization that was there for a very long time that's been buried and the debris has grown over. I mean, pine trees grow at a rapid rate and those forests are huge. And that just, and everybody's like, oh, there's no such thing as this, there's no such thing as that. But it's the density of it. And yes, you hear a lot of things where, we should have found this or we had that going, but there's some things that we just can't discover yet. Like there's just no way to get into it. Like I told you last week, for example, if you want to go see cassowaries in the wild in the world's oldest rainforest, you can do the tour there, but you're not guaranteed you're going to see one. It's so dense, you can't get through it. They can, but you can't. And when they want to come out, it's rare. So that animal itself, being seen as rare as it's seen, because it doesn't care. Like it's not thinking if it comes out and it sees you there, it just crosses the road and moves on, right? Or goes out to the beach because it doesn't care. But if it cared about being seen, I think that it would be a lot harder to find one or see one or whatever. What's up, Joseph? How are you? It would be a lot harder to find one. It'd be a lot harder to see something had they not want to be seen, because you just can't see them. And I was reading, they say, oh, you can come on the cassowary tour, but you might not see one. That's not our fault. They come out there rare, whatever. This time of year is a little better than others, blah, blah, blah. And they're very rare to see.
Right.
For most people.
Right. Well, I mean, but that makes sense, though. I mean, if that's their territory, that's their home, they're going to know it better than us. And if it's super dense, we can't get through it like they can. They've adapted to learn how to live and thrive in that type of environment, as where we haven't.
Correct. And you sit and stuff and, and you think about, hey, Jeff, how are you, buddy? Yeah, I'll get on that too. I do want to talk about that. I don't, yeah, I've obviously,
we'll talk about it.
I have explanations, but I think there's just, but with that being said, the density of that forest to be able to see any type of animals, the same as the depths of the ocean and certain parts of the mountains. And if something doesn't want to be seen or found, and it can be anything, and I'm not necessarily talking about a Sasquatch or Yetis, I'm talking about any living thing,
right,
that wasn't supposed to be with us per se, that doesn't want to be seen, is not going to want to be seen. And I think there's a lot of relevance to that. And I looked at the vast, I just watched the video and I was like, if 3 people got together and tried to map through that and dense, it would take 100, 150 lifetimes.
Yeah.
You
I
couldn't do
believe
it.
that.
You couldn't do it. So unless we come up with some super X-ray machine satellite that's going to shine down, look through the trees and the ground to look up bone matter or entity of some sort living there and eat anything at all. It's very hard, man. It's very hard. I mean, it's dense, and it's, sunlight doesn't even reach parts of that area. So you're not even going to see heat or any of it. You're going to see any of it. And
that's like the jungle in the Congo. It's the same thing. It's so dense, like you can't see anything from the top. Like when people are like, "Oh, just throw a drone over." It's like, you don't even know how that works. Like you can't just throw a drone over and expect to see
100%. And I think that there's a lot of things that is very. I think there's a lot of stuff in the archives. I think there's a lot of things that are already found. They just, because I think there's so much, because human beings have an ideology of what they want to feel about themselves or what they want to believe in or what they want to look at. That sometimes, I when you hear the word, the truth hurts and it can cause a ripple effect of shit. It can, you know.
It does.
And I
Yeah.
think that there's a lot to be said about that. There's a lot to be said because I think something like that would be it'd be easier for us now to accept it. It's interesting because I think it was easier back in the day to accept it. I think if we lived in the Wild West and say, for the sake of argument, somebody shot a Sasquatch,
Yeah.
right? Which I think probably did happen. I think a lot of any of the Native American stuff that wrote about Sasquatch and stuff and how they helped protect them. I mean, that's a real thing, and mainly a lot of that was in Canada. I just want to put that out there. A lot of it.
Canada and Alaska.
People would look at it. They would pay their gold coin or whatever, their token or whatever, to go in and see it. Right?
Yeah.
There's really no way to preserve it, and it gets into a private thing, and it leads into this. So I saw something, and I sent it to you about 100 years from now. 21, 24. You'll be gone. No one's going to care about you. Any long-lasting possessions you have may be in their possession, right? So if my great-great-grandfather shot a Sasquatch, right, and he had a skeleton of it or kept the skull, chances are he got in a fight with my great-great-grandma about keeping a dead monkey around the house. So it gets shoved into a box, right? He lives his life. He knows where it's at. Nobody else does. It's in his garage. Well, a storm comes through. It destroys the whole thing. Somebody finds the skull. It's cool. They found that, so they've got it collected, right? And next thing you know, it's old and dusty. Nobody cares. Oh, I think my great-grandfather gorilla skull is pretty cool. It gets thrown in the trash because people think it's gross. And you just lose all of it. So there's a lot of things, and I even think with wildlife, etc., is it's very relevant to what I'm saying, and I think that a lot of it would be lost. So, and then it was like, let's cover it all up. The bones found in the boneyard in Alaska. Just all the bones found in the boneyard in Alaska. Yeah, that's a pretty. I was looking at that too when I was looking at some of the stuff like that tree that uprooted, and there was a medieval knight under it.
Yeah, that is awesome.
That is. Like,
could you imagine?
Over the guys like looking in the tree, and you guys can look it up. I can tell you where to go, and I
think that's amazing.
I'll give you the title, and you guys can look at it. But his actual skeletal remains, his legs were still in the ground, like you can see him, but his whole like rib cage and spine was in the root system from the medieval era. It was just in there, right?
So cool.
Yeah, he was just cool. So. I think he died, right? And somebody probably planted a little tree over top of him or something like that.
Because, or he died next to the tree. Like there were some of those cases where like the knights would get really like overheated.
I don't even know because he was like dead set in the middle of it, when you see it looked over, he's like right in the middle of the root system, like somebody planted it over him. Which you're right, he could have died next to a little tree. He could,
yeah. I just
a bird could have shit on him when he died. I mean, there's that too. I mean, and then because that's how trees grow most of the time.
Yeah, no, but I mean, like, how like they used to have like reports of like in like old literature where like the knights would get really hot from wearing all that heavy metal and stuff. And they'd sit by a tree and have heat stroke and they would die, or like they'd be out in the woods and just have heat stroke. So I just wonder if like he was suffering from some type of heat stroke and sat by this what would have been a smaller tree at that time, but then the tree absorbed him as it grew, because trees do that. Trees are weird like that. They eat everything. You park a bike next to it, and all of a sudden it becomes part of the tree down the road.
Or like that, that dog that was found in the middle of a tree.
Oh my God, that was so horrible. He was so preserved, but it was so sad. I remember that.
That's funny.
Awesome. It was awful.
Yeah. So I mean, with that type of stuff, you would lose that evidence. But what I guess my point, what I was saying was, it was back then they'd be like, oh, they found a monkey or a Sasquatch or Bigfoot in the woods. How cool! And take pictures and move on.
Yeah.
They don't want to. Oh, that's all a bunch of phony stuff. You don't want to believe in that. You want to believe in government, and that's not real because they said this wasn't real, and people get into it like, oh, that's not real. And so, but now that there's a lot more outreach, and we have a really long outreach to people. Like, it's clearly everybody can be a hero now. Everybody can be a celebrity. I mean, there's no. A lot more people have a voice, and look at that. They're trying to shut that down too, right?
Right.
I think now, if someone came out and said, "Oh, there's going to be people go, that's not a real Bigfoot," because it's not spoken about in the whatever religious book they're reading at the time.
Hands on.
But that doesn't necessarily. And I touched on that last week when they talk. Agreed. I told you about the behemoth in the Nile. They didn't say crocodile, but we know what that is. We know what that is because
that was a valid.
Whales do not live in the wild, but I mean, so that's just one part of it. And then there was, the Egyptians. They loved and respected and kept crocodiles. And then there's tribes that worship crocodiles.
Right.
Because crocodiles were leftover reptilian gods.
Speaking of crocodiles and crocodilians and those types of specimen, because they haven't really changed a whole lot from the prehistoric.
About 6,000 years. They haven't evolved in about 6,000 years.
Right.
That's like what they're looking at. What I was reading about bone structure. I mean, some of that could have changed now. And there's new discoveries on that, Brittany. A lot.
On the crocodilians?
And things that were put in books before, within the past 10 years, we've added species because we realized that we were wrong on what we were saying about particular species of crocodilian. So they're like, oh, that's this species now because we were wrong. Look at the science behind this. So go ahead. What was your question?
Oh, that's actually interesting. That actually applies to what I was about to say. But what I'm leading to with this is I'm thinking and talking about this earlier. Actually, I was actually having this conversation with Mom, but thinking about dinosaurs and how the billions of years and process and everything like this. But we haven't really completely found several different types of dinosaurs with feathers and fur and all this elaborate theory that they keep adding on to these dinosaurs. They found one tiny one that's 4 feet tall that it looked like it would have had more of a winged type body, which means it may have had feathers, being that it was in a more colder environment. Yada, yada, yada. Right? Hi, Seth. So what I theorized on and was thinking about, and I was like, this is a good question for Troy, because if dinosaurs, most of the time depicted with scales, more reptilian, they don't really reptiles. They don't need wool. They don't need fur and stuff like that because they're cold-blooded. They have different ways of doing things.
Brother.
Hey,
What's
Jimmy.
going on, guys?
What's up?
It made me think about dinosaurs and how our Earth goes through phases of cold, hot all the time, right? And so if there were dinosaurs that were had the same type of skin like the reptilians that we have today, much like the crocodilians, I would almost assume, in theory, their bodies would gauge the cold temperature the same way a crocodilian would, to where they would process, slow down, almost hibernate until the cold season would pass, right? I would assume that some of these dinosaurs would have evolved to adapt to that same type of resource of how to get through the cold, much like alligators and crocodiles and all those other specimens do. They have a process. I would just think that there's a connection there that I think that even science is maybe overlooking when they say the cold killed all the dinosaurs. When if they were really scaly and they didn't have fur and they didn't have all that stuff that's now been theorized, they may have hibernized, oh shoot, can't think of the word.
Hybridized.
It is right, hybridized. The same way a crocodilian species would have, based on the same type of kind of similarities of being a reptile type mammal mix thing.
Let me touch on that a little bit. If you have crocodiles, such as myself or Jimmy and very few of us, and believe me, most people who have them really don't understand what they have because it's all lumped into the same thing. They're completely different. Alligators have been forced to adapt. If Jimmy and I were to get butt naked in South Carolina during the winter and lay in the rivers that these alligators do and freeze up, we're dead. Okay.
Right.
So alligators have been forced to evolve into, we can tolerate high cold. I don't even worry about the alligators. They're like, it's 40 degrees. Are you worried about the alligators? Nope. Because when you mess with them, right, even the smaller ones, they know what they're doing, right? They get themselves nestled into their spot. They get it into their mindset. And crocodiles have an extremely strong mind. Anybody can argue me with it. There's a lot of professionals in the industry I've talked to, Colette being one of them, and we talk about the intelligence, and even we talked about a crocodile one time that she still believes to this day just killed itself by turning itself off.
Wow.
She said it was perfect one day. I went in the next day and we were doing stuff and it went over to the corner. It was just gone. Not unhealthy, just it was done. Right. And nobody knew why I did it. We just knew that it did it. Right. So alligators can shut their bodies down. And even more crazy, the alligator snapping turtle will freeze in ice. It doesn't have its nose sticking out. It's just frozen solid like a block in there. Slows its heart rate down to 1 beat every 60 minutes or whatever it is, or every 16 minutes. And you think, holy smokes, the evolutionary process of this. And so to say that dinosaurs went extinct is not true, because we have crocodiles, we have Komodo dragons, and we have big rat-type birds that definitely just evolved. So not everything died. It
Right.
just adapted. You know, if you look at the Inuits or the Eskimos that live way up in the top in the polar,
Right.
their skin color and their bone structure, the width of their nostrils for breathing is to pull
Right.
in more oxygen. They've evolved to their area. They
Right.
live in temperatures that I don't care how much we're warmed up, we're going to die in that.
Right.
So
Right.
I think there's a lot to when people say, "Oh, well, I think it's all gone." I do think there's probably still some sort of reptilian or dinosaur that would be living in a rural crazy area like that. I mean,
Yeah. Like, I just think it's so strange that it's like, because I just try. I mean, like, I get it. Like, there's a certain basis line of what we're supposed to follow in science, but because science is ever changing and it is changing history, it's funny. Like, within the scientific community, they fight themselves constantly. There's
course.
like one side of science that's like, but we're finding all these new things, which means we need to rewrite this or that because this isn't really fact anymore. It's more still in the theory basis.
Sure.
To where the other side is like, no, it's fact, but we don't have all the data. It doesn't matter. It's fact. Like, this is what we know and this is what we're sticking to. Like,
But everybody
even
will say that
science
no matter
itself
what they
will fight
follow.
itself.
Right.
Right. And so what's even crazier is like paleontologists or Egyptologists, they will fight science. Like, they're butting heads sometimes because of what discoveries they're finding that's not matching what the scientific community is basing the books and
which
and
has
how
been
we're
a lot
supposed to data
recently,
collect
right?
stuff.
Yes.
A lot of new
Yes.
stuff. Yeah.
A lot lately. And it's getting more and more intriguing, and it is making me double back on like some of these said what look like dinosaurs being seen in areas that are so rural. And like Troy brought up Canada
Very true,
earlier,
Josh.
it was such a great point because people don't realize that 60% of Washington state, 60% of the mountain range has not even been touched by a forest ranger. Nobody.
I mean, I'm
They
sure
can't
there's
get
been
up
some
there.
private hikers and stuff in there.
Yeah, but I mean, like, but even
nobody up to
60% of the
discover.
state, that is
Sure.
a massive amount of the state that you can't get. Like, it's like you were saying, dense, really heavily wooded. And like,
Marilyn, hello.
I have
Holly,
this
what's
conversation
up?
sometimes with people that think that they know everything about the woods. And it's not that I laugh, but I just go, I don't know how you can think that when that's not your home.
Right.
You weren't raised to grow up and adapt and live in the woods, how to figure out how you can keep yourself warm. You know, you didn't grow up wild to where if something, that's all it is, like an animal, like that's all it knows. It knows how to protect itself. It's learned from knowing, man, in the woods, I watch other animals get blown away. I run away from those animals.
Sure.
But they know how to
Like
hide.
sharks learn that anytime there's a boat or an explosion in the water, there's meat.
Right. Yeah, it's a trained behavior. And like, you know, Troy, you do behavioral. That's a trained behavior. It learns from seeing and
Thank you,
adapting
Marilyn.
to that. So I think it's fascinating that we don't explore these theories or these ideas more because there's so much more to it. And the basic data in the science is there, but we just kind of have a narrative, I guess. And so we only pick what fits that narrative when we really should be examining the entire data and not just picking some of it. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
So it's just very interesting to me. And so to know that there's like 60% of Washington, like you were saying about even them, like, look at lemurs. Lemurs history is crazy. He's licking the mic.
What do you got to say today?
What do you got to say today, buddy? Because you know you have
He's a
fans.
little cutie
Lemurs
pie.
are another one. They've evolved from mouse lemurs. If you look at the island and where they started, mouse lemurs started
insane.
all of that. And I think, and there's so many, and we like killed off the do you know, people don't realize that there were lemurs up to about 400 years ago, which isn't that long ago, the size of gorillas.
Yeah. That's crazy to me.
From a
I
mouse
didn't know that.
lemur.
That's
Insane.
crazy.
From a mouse lemur. So you have, you can look that up, Jimmy. I'll send you some info on it. But a mouse lemur, the size of a gorilla, dude, or goes from a mouse lemur to the size of a gorilla. Now it's like the moa bird and all that we killed off.
Yeah.
We just overshot it because it was gentle. It was a big rat type. We didn't even get a chance to study that animal. We didn't get a chance to study where it came from, what it was about, what it did. And I think the answer
That's
to
so
a lot
sad.
of our past and our history, and I'm sure Jimmy may agree, is animals, dude.
Yeah. They hold the keys.
Crocodiles, reptilians. You know, a lot of these people that talk about these reptile communities that used to live, these reptilian humanoids.
Oh, yeah. Oh.
There's some that's interesting. right? Because reptiles are the most adaptable stuff. Like you could take a really big American alligator and a really big saltwater croc and put him out in 30 degrees, and that croc is dead. And I don't care how super croc he is. He's not evolved to deal with that. He's just
Right.
not. So you might get a big 18-footer that's fat and gets lucky that year because he didn't get to his organs. But over time, crocs will die. Like American crocodiles, they just can't take that cold weather. As where alligators are out there, they'll eat when it's 40 degrees.
You know what animal I find interesting is, I don't want to bring it up, but the tegu is very adaptable. And they did studies with the tegu. They're a tropical animal, but they had them in different areas where they've left them out in the cold, and they figure it out. They adapt to it. So I think you and I were talking about it a while back, where I guess up north they was in like freezing cold weather and they lived.
Because they know how to burrow. They know how to dig holes to get underneath it. You're talking about, he's right. You're talking about an animal that's like a South American animal.
Yeah.
Yep.
An animal that it needs a lot of heat and a lot of different things. And David, that was actually Slash. That was actually Slash.
We destroy a lot of animals that really could have thrived and survived and still be around today. Like the Tasmanian tiger, when we captured one and had one in captivity, it was our stupidity for not knowing the animal and knowing how to properly take care of it because it was a new species to us.
Right.
We killed it in captivity. It was only there for like 4 or 5 days before it died in captivity. That was in the 1930s. They had it. It was inside of a cage. There's video of it. But it was because they left it out in the cold. It caught pneumonia and it died from the pneumonia from being left in the cold with no proper shelter.
Don't you think it's interesting that they haven't been able to keep a great white shark? And we don't know a lot about them.
Oh, yeah. They
live a very secret life, dude.
Yep.
And I was just reading how that big this person's a videographer, and he caught that footage of that big, I want to say it was either a tiger or a bull, I could be wrong, trying to bite a piece of meat off of a dead sperm whale.
Oh, geez.
And the country, wherever it was, I don't remember if it was the United States or wherever they found it, they drug it to shore and cut it up and gave it a proper burial. They didn't leave it out there, but because it was just monstrophic. And the scars on that animal. Let's just think about how little we are, okay? When we think about us as people, oh, we're awesome or whatever. Yes, we're doing tests, and yes, some people have more money than others and this and that. But really, at the end of the day, we get up, we use the bathroom, we cook, we go out and we tend to our little spot that we live in. We may go to the store and back, right? And then you have something like a sperm whale that lives in groups. Hey, Sammy, lives in groups. That hunts 8 miles underwater, 8 miles under the water. The pressure that animal has evolved to take so we can eat squid. And when you see these rip marks up the side of that animal's, so they swim straight down. And the reason I have that big bone structure from what they're studying, from what I've been reading about them, because I'm really intrigued with the sperm whale. I think they're cool. They go as far as they can down and they slam the squid on the bottom of the ground to kill it with brute force.
Wow.
And while they're doing that, it's holding on to them, and they have that little mouth that opens, and they get them and they eat them. But their entire head, it's like it'd be like if we walked around with garbage cans for heads, right? And we had a little bitty mouth on the bottom, and we smashed what we wanted to eat, and we just nibbled on it. It's just amazing to me. But when you think about 8 miles, guys, next time you're driving, do your trip monitor mileage reader for 8 miles.
Yeah,
think about
that's a far ass distance.
Look up, exactly. Look up every 6 foot of atmosphere in water. People don't understand that water is a different atmosphere. So I'm a diver. I know about all that stuff. I've been doing it for years, but it's a different atmosphere. So the lower you go, the atmosphere changes. The pressure's different, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if the submarine really popped or didn't pop. I don't know what all that bullshit was about because nobody talks about it anymore. It was like a big thing. Let's just cover
like it never happened.
Yeah, let's just exploit this because something big's going on, and But to think of 8 miles down, the pressure.
Yeah, that's unbelievable.
And they do come to the surface.
Yeah.
And it's cool because they sleep straight down. Like their heads are straight down. They just hover. They look like these bowling pins, right? And then when it's time, man, they get down to business.
Yeah.
I'm enthralled. And like I said, up in Canada, the narwhals.
Oh, those guys are so cool.
Okay, but still, I can't find it. Why do they have those horns?
I know. I don't know.
They have a spiral unicorn horn in the middle of a narwhal. We have no idea about what we're talking about when we talk about things or animals or any of that for that matter. It blows me away because
they think they do,
much of that.
They think they do. Like, what I think is so fascinating is like somebody will theorize it and all of a sudden it's fact and it's in the book and now we're teaching it. And it's like, but we don't really know that for sure. It's just based off of what we're trying to match to other said whales that might be in the same like said you know what I mean? Like, it always cracks me up. And you're right, we really don't. Like, I want to know why out of all the whales the narwhal has to have this.
And they're rare.
Yeah. But that's like the oarfish. Like, everybody freaks out about the oarfish when it comes to surface because it's the most bizarre looking fish you'll ever see. They get up to like 20 feet long.
I know. Well, it's why it looks like a sea dragon. And they get longer than 20 feet.
Yeah, they do. But I'm saying the longest one that's been captured was up on Catalina Island. It measured out almost 19 feet long. But what's crazy about them is that they are deep sea fish. They are not like super deep sea fish. And so whenever there is like, people are always like, oh, it's a bad omen to see one. Because of course, whatever, they believe TikTok.
Well, but that goes back. It's not that it's TikTok. It goes back to religious practices.
I know. But the truth is that like, one thing we do know is that based off sonar and certain things that happen underwater, it can jolt the animals that live in the water. It can jolt their sense of understanding of hearing and vibrations and stuff of what their natural environment is. So if there is an earthquake or a tremor in the surface of the water or in whatever region they're at, if there's a tremor from like an earthquake or a tsunaami or anything like that, it can actually disorient that animal and make it come to the surface.
Bombs and shit, and we did that.
Yeah, or when we're doing water testing that we shouldn't be doing, like when we killed all those whales because the sound, the harp machine, the harp weapon. But so basically, it's like when you do these things, it can. Or even natural underwater phenomenon that we're not thinking about, volcanic activity, underwater shifting, all these different things that happen that we don't feel, but the fish and the animals in the water do feel. So what's fascinating about that is like when an oarfish comes to the surface, it's either dying because it's starting to come up and it's dying. So you're going to get it right before it dies, or it's been disoriented by something, which always leads me to believe if the legend behind it is you see one before an earthquake or Godzilla, or a tsunami or something of natural phenomenon like that, then it leads me to believe that they're more highly sensitive to those actions in our underwater canals than we would ever think. So that's why they would be considered that.
So that leads me into, and this will be good for Jimmy too, because he can answer some of it. That leads me into, it's 2024.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. 2024. And we do not know that much about animals. I mean, every day, dude. Every day something happens, and I'm like, "What is that?" You learn the way they communicate with you. You know, like the other day, my here's an example. My capybara comes in for bed at night. Okay, bring him into bed. He gets his vitamin C and all that. And everybody's like, "Oh, whatever." But I give him his little chow and his vitamin C, right? But he tells me now I have to go to the bathroom. So it was weird because he started making a different sound to me. Like I heard him from the living room and it was a different sound. It was like a clicking kind of call sound.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, what's wrong? What's going on? You know? And I open the door and he goes all the way out to his bowl, climbs in it. You can hear his little pee like a guy in the morning. Dribbling in there. Goes to the bathroom and then he walks back in. I'm like, he just taught me something. I had no idea. Now, somebody else that probably keeps them, a lot of people don't keep their animals the way me or Jimmy keep their animals.
Yeah.
No.
Right. They have a thing. It's like, yep, this is my place. And I got a Bengal tiger and I got a Kookaburra, and they don't even, I spend every hour with them. We have a mandatory thing. Come sick, shine. I mean, they come in, right?
Yeah.
There's a shifting process. There's a way to raise certain animals. And I don't talk a whole lot about it, but there's just ways to do it. And the people that pretend to do it, and that pretend they know, they stick it out all over the place, and they're like, oh, you know, I'm renowned and only I know the best. And half of them really don't know, you know. And I can sit and have a conversation with Jimmy. I'm like, yo, have you ever seen this happen? He's like, oh yeah, dude, one time. And you're like, you talk to someone else, these whatever they think they are, you know, TV specialist or whatever. And it's just not true. And when you realize, I begin to realize that we're pretty dumb. We're dumb primates. We're dumb.
Right? We're very small.
Right. We've built this, you know, a Planet of the Apes.
Scale up, but we're small.
Exactly. And Planet of the Apes, because we're an emotional thinking creature. We don't logically think. We destroy more than we than we do, because we're emotional. We're emotional creatures. But when I think about that, like some of the crocodiles that I've dealt with, and a lot of people, like, I hear them say, I can't believe you get in there like that with that thing and let it come all the way up to your knees like that. I can't believe you do that. Well, extreme people do extreme things, and you never learn until you really experience something. And I remember a scene in the 1993 Jurassic Park when he said, he looks up and he's like, "Oh, you clever girl," and he got taken. Right? There are monitors that hunt that way, that distract, and so another one can kill you. Which somebody knew that. They researched it somewhere. They found it in some writing in some paper, and they added it into the movie. Exactly. And there's an old myth that I found. I stumbled across it a few years ago, and I've always remembered it, that the people that lived on the Galapagos Islands, and there's a lot to that too. I could talk for 2 hours on the Galapagos Islands and what we screwed that up too. When the Spanish were dumping goats off there so that they could harvest goats, they wiped out so many different species, and you can learn about that in the Smithsonian. But if a Galapagos tortoise approached you, like say Jimmy and I and you, we all went to the island, right? And they came up to us, and we were with another group of people, they would come to us. We were good. If they avoided you, they could read you because of the amount of time that they live. And people argue they don't live that long. They do. They can live upwards of 300 years. From the research that I have been seeing, they can live that long. And I think there was one still alive that was alive when Darwin was, and there was one of the oldest tortoise species alive that I knew of that lived the longest, I think, on record, where it was given away, was a radiated tortoise.
Oh, wow.
It was a gift, and it was passed down every 100 years to a different family.
A radiated. Wow.
Yeah, I'll send you all that. And so when you think about the longevity of a tortoise, it's just a big thing with a box that eats grass. Is it though? In our teachings and human teaching, they teach that patience is a virtue, right? So if I'm training a crocodile with Jimmy, you have to be patient, because I believe the crocodile is smarter than we are.
Oh, for sure.
It's seeing what we're missing. It can see when you clench your butt cheeks, when you're scared and you squeeze your butt cheeks.
For sure. And you have to give, to get, you have to stand in that line of fire. You got to put the trust in, to that animal, for a big part too. If that animal was charging at you and you smacked him in the head with a stick every time he got within 8 feet of you, he's not going to come up to you. You're not going to have that bond.
Right. He's just going to be like, no, I'm not going to get slapped. See you later.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. But I have seen it. And, I know we've all been in public. Okay. We've all been out there when someone gets a little stressed and they clench up their butt cheeks real tight. We've all seen it.
Yeah.
It's a nervous reaction. Yeah. Some people rub their arm, or some people go like this, or rub their eye, or whatever. Or some people just clench up their butt and they're nervous. Well, we were doing a training thing. I'm not going to say where. And there was we had some people in there. Of course, Flavia was with me. And I was watching movements. My job of the day was to watch what was going on with each person. And I know this crocodile really well. So does Flavia. So you know what you can do, when he wants to play and when he doesn't. And this one person was nervous. This kid was nervous. And I seen him. He clenched up his cheeks. In the minute he clenched his butt cheeks up, that crocodile flew over there. So he was watching 5 different people at once. I mean, it didn't, and I just happened to be looking at him, because had I been looking over here and the croc would have run, I would have never known what triggered it. Would have never known. I just happily, by luck, not that I'm amazing, but by luck, I happened to see him, and I said, I saw you clench up. Your pelvic clenched there. And he saw that. And he was like, fucking you, pal. And right? Yeah. And so I think to myself a lot of times when I see something happen, and I know you've seen it, Jimmy. I know you've done something, and you're like, you little bastard. But you want to be pissed.
Opportunist.
You're so like, that was so cool that I saw that, and you got one on me, that I have to be like, fuck yes, I'm going to take out reset. Because that's happened to me too.
Yeah.
And things are demanding. Like I was explaining earlier about cassowaries. And I've heard a lot of stories. There really isn't a lot known about them. So all I learn is what I know. I know that the females are very demanding, like most females. And what they want, they want. And if you take too long opening up we double gate. Okay. We always have double gates. We just do that. Doesn't matter how far. Just make sure you always have you don't want a phone call. Hey, there's a cassowary running around loose.
Right.
Because you always got that good Samaritan, right? I'll help you get the bird. I worked at a zoo in 1972 and I fed the chickens, right? And they go up, now they're stabbed to death. They're in the street dying. So anyways, I've noticed that if you take too long opening the second gate, thank you, Seth. I pride myself on that. She gets mad and she starts to stomp. And she'll put her chest up like this. And I go, I'm coming. We're trying to get you she sees the food and it's like, you're taking too long to give it to me. And I'm going to kick your ass. Right?
Yep.
She's hangry.
After research and after talking to people that the people that I respect that have them and begin to understand what they've learned, comparing notes, we've learned a lot.
Yeah.
Right? We know that they're a lot different than raising an emu. A lot. Emus are great and they can be dangerous, folks. I'm not saying that emus can be dangerous because they are. They can kick you to sleep like an ostrich.
No.
Well, I would much rather be with a baffle board and a cassowary than I would a full-size 12-foot tall ostrich male trying to kill me. I can tell you that.
They're a-holes when they want to be.
And we have a friend, a mutual friend now. Jimmy and I now have him. I've had him for a long time, and he's a friend of Jimmy's, and Jimmy's doing some stuff. But if I can ever get him one time to come on the show and talk about the time that his ostrich attacked him, right? He raised it. And when it got mature, one day, he told me, I think it broke his back or something. Like, I mean, it was terrible. And he told me
it fucked him up.
I thought I was going to die. He goes, I've been raising rat tights my whole life, and he goes, if you're ever going to get one, just get a female. They're a lot easier. But nobody wants the biggest and baddest. If I had 100 acres and I had a colony, I'd turn some ostriches loose. Cool. But I remember him telling me the story. He's like, I really thought I was dead. I could see the fence 5 feet away from me, and it was killing me. I couldn't get out. And his wife came out and said, why are you laying on the ground in the ostrich bed? He said, that's the first thing he said to me. And I'm dying out here. And if you meet his wife, you'll understand. She's like, she's so funny, man. She's so cool. Like, she's funny.
That's hilarious.
Well, I come out and he's laying around out there. I thought he was just relaxing. I was pissed off.
The ostriches.
But again, and I take that back to evolution and learning. And it's good because I know Brittany has some animal experience too, but Jimmy and I do it on a day-to-day. And so there are still things that sometimes I'm like stumped. And I'm glad that I have people to call in situations, and sometimes it baffles me because, and just talking with Colette about it at a situation that I had recently, just to be able to hear her say, oh, well, listen, this is what I think it could be. And you need to do this. And this simple, you go to a vet, it's $6,000. Okay. I talked to her and she's like, okay, you got to get some butter from the fridge and get some yarn. And I'm like, well, okay. And you do it. And the next day you're like, oh, and she's like, that's all it was. It's just put a little oil on it. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So these people that have spent their entire life doing it, if somebody ever tries to get into the animal industry and is jealous of her, they're an idiot. They should just get out. If you come into the industry of learning about another living thing that you share the planet with and you're arrogant about it and you're better or you're the master or whatever, these people they're morons, dude. And the proof is in the pudding. They end up missing limbs, dying, losing everything because it's unnecessary to do stupid things.
Mm-hmm.
We've all been bit because we spend a lot of time with things. All of us have. Right.
Yeah.
And I got to tell you, some of the guys that like Justin have been bit. That son of a bitch knows alligators. I'm sorry. He knows alligators.
100%.
I don't care if you hate him or love him. I don't care if he's whatever he is. I tell you what, if I ever was stuck somewhere in the middle of somewhere with them guys, there's a few guys I want to be in there with, and he'd be one of them.
Yeah.
Without a doubt.
You understand?
Yeah.
And not because
write it out.
He didn't do anything but teach himself.
Right.
Okay. Like Jimmy, you taught yourself, right? You wanted to do it. It wasn't like your family goes, oh, yeah, climb in there, Jimmy. I know you're 10. Get in there with alligators. It's great. I love watching you almost die and lose your limbs. Oh, my God. It doesn't work like that. So the people that take the initiative to learn things like race driving or building, like my friend TJ can pull a motor apart, and I look at it, looks like someone threw a grenade at it, and he can put it back together. And I'm like, I don't know what you did. But because he did it, took his time to do it, and some people are natural. And so, and I let the animals teach me. And I've learned so much. And so I think.
Well, it's funny when you said that, Troy. So when Lee got here, you were telling me that Lee is Houdini with escaping and, all this. And, and I've raised crocodiles and, I've had more alligators growing up, but we had like 3-4 different species of crocodile at Native Village. But
sure.
I remember after about the first week of Lee being here, after, you brought her and dropped her off, and
well, we should talk about that too, how we did it. We definitely got to talk about it after your story.
We should. But the fence was, it's a 6-foot tall fence and it has a wood lip around everything. And it has, in all my corners, I always build an overhang where in the corners, because that's the most vulnerable spot in an enclosure is a corner, because they can just climb that corner. Well, I was sitting there watching her, taking it in, seeing her and all that, and she was literally walking along the fence line, and I could literally watch her face, and she was walking 2-3 feet. She would stop, but you would see her glance up and like look at the fence. And I remember Troy, you telling me like she will try everything, and I'm like, she ain't getting out of this fucking thing, So I'm watching her. No shitting you. I'm not joking. I think I told you this, Troy. There was one corner that didn't have a lip because it had solid wood and chain link on the corner. So I didn't put a lip there. And because it's solid wood, I didn't think she'd, try. She walked the entire enclosure probably 2 times, and she went right back. She didn't try anywhere but that corner that had no lip. And she climbed, she got her nose to the top of the fence. And I remember I called her, I was like, I think I need to put a lip in this corner because she fucking climbed it. But going back to, she taught me something that day, and it's like, no matter, 5-6 feet, these corners, they all could be a vulnerable spot. And she studied it. She literally studied the entire enclosure. And it was amazing. I could literally watch her eyes scan and like look at stuff. And I'm like, this bitch is looking how to get out. And that's what she did.
I found that. They're very smart. She's smart. Even a couple. I know some people may beg to differ, but we have 2 Siamese and soon to be another one. And I think that they're really smart. And because they can't talk to us and go, hey, she would. Here's a story. I'll tell you about it. When Jimmy and we wanted to try, I told him, I said, we need to try this because I want Jimmy, now that she's living there, not to be an enemy. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So we were not involved in the capture. So Flavio orchestrated the capture, and he had certain people involved in the capture. She does remember. She will remember, and you will never get her trust. It's just the way she is. This animal is not stupid by any means, and she remembers. So Jimmy and we doused ourselves up with alcohol, the alcohol wipe stuff. So we didn't have really any scent. That was the strongest scent, right? Because they're very susceptible. And we didn't talk. So when the animal got there, we freed her without speaking, right?
From the entire process to getting her
the whole
out of the
thing.
truck, everything. Yeah.
When nobody talked, we said everybody has to shut up, and nobody was allowed to talk. When we took her out, she was wrapped. Her face was wrapped and everything. She was completely wrapped up, muffled up with her blanket and everything. Obviously it's called mummifying, and they leave the nose open so she can breathe, but it keeps her from banging herself up. So neither here nor there. If you're not going to move Crocs, that's irrelevant. But we didn't talk. Jimmy and I put her in, and then in the very end, when we were releasing her, we took her mask off, and I remember her eyes dilating really big, and she looked at us, and she saw Jimmy, and she saw me. And we're like, go to the water. And she just turned real gently and walked in the water. We released her. So the first vision in her mind was Jimmy and I releasing her. Not yanking her around, not hurting her, but taking the stuff off of her was Jimmy and I. Helping her out of that mess was Jimmy and I. And I remember him calling me. He's like, dude, and I'm going to lead this into another real quick story. He would be like, she's just refusing to eat, doesn't want to go anywhere, and blah, blah. And we were baffled by it. I'm like, man, we got to think about it. And he said, yeah, I've got so-and-so next to him. I go, that's it. And I remember what it was. She is a defensive crocodile. She's not an offensive crocodile. And where she lived before, she was around an offensive alligator. And she climbed the fence and got in with him, and he damn near killed her. And from then on, she didn't want to be in that enclosure next to him anymore. So she started climbing out of it. Every way she could figure out, she would climb out of it because of that. That's exactly what she started doing. And we find her in other parts of the area, other parts of the park. So then it was like, oh, I don't want that thing anymore. It's dangerous. I don't want to hear whatever, blah, blah, blah. We'll fix it, work it out. And then I ended up getting the animal. And so I was like, man, she can see that alligator. We got to stop her from seeing the alligator. And what happened after that? How did it fit? You saw more than I did. When you stopped it, what happened?
Well, like you said, and that was also when she was trying the enclosure a lot too. She quit eating. She was trying the enclosure, basically put a visual barrier up. And once that visual barrier came up, I would say probably within 2 days, she took food. Within a couple of days after that, and she quit trying everything. And I feel like I could pull the lips down, and she won't even try anymore. She's so content.
Exactly, and I think she's talking to us. Basically, is the moral of the story. She can't say, "Hey, Jimmy, I'm really stressed about this. Help me." She started her maneuver. She was doing different. She was communicating. She was protesting by not eating
through her body language and stuff.
But let's rewind it for a minute. When we got her undone, and Troy told her to go in the water, she walked right past both of us, right into the pool, and we shut the door. We walked around to the front of the enclosure, and this is only within maybe 5 minutes of her being released in there.
Sure.
And Troy's like, Lee, and of course Lee didn't know my voice at the time, but knew Troy's right away. And she was underwater, checking everything out. As soon as Troy spoke her name and told her to come out, she popped up and she came out of the water. She didn't come all the way to the fence. She came probably within, I think it was like 8 feet of the fence, but she came right out to Troy. And this was a new area, a new, everything was new, except the only thing that wasn't new was Troy and his voice. And Lee reacted to that and came out. But that shows the bond that you have with her and that trust that she has with you.
Over time at the park, I made friends with her. Yep, I did.
Exactly.
I used to brush her teeth. She'd open her mouth for me. She'd open her mouth for me, and I would get in there with this high-powered nozzle, and I would just squirt her teeth out, and she would she'd close her glottis. And then for those of you that don't know what a glottis is, it's the back of the mouth. They close it up. Jimmy explains that a lot of his shows, but the glottis closes the back of the mouth. That's why when alligator's mouth open, it doesn't look like it goes anywhere, because it opens like this, and then they seal it the same way we kind of do when we push the tongue to the roof of our mouth when we're swimming. But so I would squirt her mouth out because she'd get algae, and we just clean her, right?
Yeah.
And she did go to a couple other places, and it wasn't that those people didn't know what they were doing, but we finally figured out the problem. Early on, Flavio we were doing a lot of training, and Flavio kept me in the good guy position, right? Mm-hmm. And he would have somebody else, the bad guy, chasing or whatever. And a lot of people were terrified of Lee because Flavio would be like, just stand there. And we'd go in there with a chick, and she would run 100 miles an hour up to you and stop right at your knees. And it's terrifying. I'm not going to kid around. You're like,
she's a 9-foot fucking Croc.
Her teeth were so glassy white. That's all you see is this big smile coming at you. And what's interesting is I think, wow, it was terrifying at the time, but it built a relationship. And now she loves Jimmy like that because Jimmy doesn't hurt her. He brings her food. He doesn't disturb her. He lets her be herself. He talks to her.
Well, it's funny you say that. I can tell the difference between me. I have created a bond with her, but mine is more, I think, food response in a sense. Okay. You have that, but you built a different bond with Lee. And when you come and you talk to her, I see the different in reaction to her in the sense of how the noises she makes. They have different grunts and different tones, and hers is different with you, than to me.
Well, Jimmy.
It could be a more nurturing thing with Troy.
Well, I'll tell you why. Every day I would go in early. This was years ago, man. This was back in 2015. Every day I would go in early with her at the park. And I had this really long car wash brush. Because Flavia and I used to clean the crocodiles, and the big American crocs, they're like, oh, go ahead, man. And they'll curve at you, and you're scrubbing them. They get to love it. But when I first started doing it, she would really get mad at me and sling around. I just kept touching her with it every day. And I'd talk to her, Lee, it's okay. It took me a couple weeks, but then when I'd come up there, she'd literally come out of the water and then lay next to the fence and let me just rub her back. I'd hose her off and rub her back. I saw Justin do it with an alligator, so I started trying to do it with this croc. And you know what? I just built a relationship with her like that. And then when she was really good, she was picky. I'd give her a frozen thawed chick, which was her favorite. I mean,
it still is.
Damn, well, let me tell you what. She go crazy. You don't even want to have one near you,
Nope.
But, and that's what I mean, guys. That goes back to what I was saying earlier about all of us and understanding. There's so much things that we don't know that someone puts down in a book and says yada yada yada, and it's just not true. You can look at Kent Vliet. He's an alligator specialist, an academic in the alligator world, and he was doing it way back in the 80s. Man, he's getting in the water.
Realm of the alligator.
What it's called. And that inspired a lot of us. I was enthralled that he actually did that. I don't know how Jimmy felt, but when he saw, he's probably like, "What? This guy's in there with a camera," And Flavio was doing stuff back like that. Flavio was doing that stuff. People would poke.
There was only a handful of people doing it, and Kent was definitely one of the first. Going in the water like that, I believe. And stuff. And
but you know what? We want to work with them, and we love them animals, and they weren't just big dumb Pac-Mans, and we figured that out. And so there's a lot to it. And we are at the top of the hour, so we'll wrap it up. Go ahead, Brittany. Let's wrap up a couple things, and we'll just go ahead and end the show on a good note.
Yeah, I think it's just when you're working with animals, like you were saying, over time, you just begin to learn them and know them. But we're in a different era than we were. And I kind of wish we kind of could go back in time a little bit with era, because even like in the 20s and 30s, it was the exploration.
Yeah, and there were some animals still alive in the 20s and 30s.
Right.
I would like to have seen.
Me too. And it's like those were the big exploration eras, but it's something that I thought about the other day and I hadn't really thought much about. It was like, and in my research, obviously it's a little bit different, but it's interesting to me because it does also play in line with like animals and like finding these animals and learning how they adapted and learning their behaviors and things like that. But what's really fun for me is like during the exploration era, even all the way up into the 80s, we didn't have like the technology we have now. So everything you're learning was like, yeah, here's your book to have like a little bit of information on the bottom, but then you get so many hours hands-on. So you are learning those animals. You know, like in the 70s and 80s, you were more hands-on, you were more learning the species. Like now I feel like because we're so electronically driven, we think we know everything based off of, well, I can Google it in my phone and I know this, this, and this, and that's how you're supposed to do it, right? But in the exploration era, like we couldn't just Google who last saw a caiman at this location. Oh, it says here that somebody said there was a last, like in the exploration era, which makes it so intriguing for me and why I love reading books from those periods of time, was because those explorers and those adventurers who wanted to learn those species, learn those animals, would go out, ask questions, talk to the natives, ask how they adapted. What do they do? What's their behavior like? And they took the time to process it in the wild, not from a book. They would write a book from some of the knowledge they learned, but it was more exploration and adventure of discovery and not just using their phone to call a friend. Like, so I think that in a way, all of that has hurt us in those industries.
Of course.
A lot.
And
because we don't have that anymore.
Jimmy gets it every day. He knows what I mean.
Yeah.
And on that note,
so we're not learning.
On the Judy situation, before TikTok went, got too big.
I was about to mention TikTok.
She raised TikTok, which is no Siamese. So when we were kids, my mom was like, oh my God, I don't want these reptiles around. You're only allowed to have a turtle. Right? That's all we had when we were little, no snakes in the house. And we don't have any of that. And then she ended up helping me raise a couple baby adolescent crocodiles. And as they got bigger, we moved them out to Jimmy. But she developed quite a relationship with TikTok.
She did. So, she loved it.
Guys, you can read anything you want in a book. I'll leave you all with this. Unless you're out there doing it, you really don't know. So I can sit you down and tell you how hard I can hit you in the face, but you have no idea how hard I can do it until I actually do it to you. You understand? Exactly. And that's really where it comes when you're out in the field and you're working. You have to understand. People can tell you all they want, but until you do it, until you're in the middle of something, and like I have been with Jimmy and a lot of other of my colleagues and friends, you never know. So,
yep.
Again, I appreciate everybody. Tracy, thank you for that nice thing that you said about us too. We really appreciate
Tracy,
that.
thank you.
Again, if you ever have any questions like that, Tracy, and you want to learn anything, just DM me, I'm sure, and Jimmy, if you ever do anything with alligators, I'll be glad to help you. And if I don't know somebody, I'll find someone that does. And I really respect that. Thank you again. Samantha, thank you for coming in. Good vibes to you too, Seth. Good night. Thank you. And everybody, thanks for coming out to the Motley Croc Show. We love every one of you. Jeff, every one of you. Jeff Bell, everybody that's come out. If I forgot your name, it's just because I don't have time to say it, but we do appreciate it. We appreciate the support. Thanks again, guys.